All right, welcome back to my channel and welcome to part 2 of first home renovation process. Today we're going to be going through my first time refinishing hardwood floors. So this home was built in the 1920s, which means the hardwood floors that are scattered throughout the entirety of this house are also from the 1920s. And so a little bit old, worn, needed some refinishing. I've never done that before, so this video is going to show from start to finish my first attempt at refinishing hardwood floors like this. So follow along, enjoy, and hopefully you get a little bit out of this video and see that even if you have no experience with something like this, you're still able to do it with a little bit of hard work and elbow grease and get a pretty good outcome. So follow along and see the outcome at the end. So the sanding process was covered a little bit in part 1 of this series. So if you want to see the sanding process itself, feel free to go back and look at that video. But we used a drum sander that we rented for 24 hours from Home Depot. It was about $75. You can see all of the cost breakdown in the top right corner, but we used 36 grit sandpaper and then proceeded with 100 grit sandpaper on the drum sander. And then for around the edges, we used the orbital sander, which used 36, 80 grit, and 100 grit. Using that combination gave us a clean finish around the edges and throughout the entire room, which allowed us to move easily into water popping, which you can see right here. I'm spreading water evenly across the entirety of the floors to allow it to settle and open the pores of the floor. From there, we started applying the stain. I started with the library first just to get a understanding of what the process was, since most of this room will be covered with bookshelves anyways. But you can see me with my first attempt at using the lambskin pad. Apply it, I'm spreading it and then quickly evenly applying it, dragging it back and forth. Later I would change up this process, but this was my first attempt. So just trying to get an even coat across the floors. From there, I moved on to the rest of the house. The living room and the dining room started off by sweeping any extra debris so that it didn't get caught in the stain. That's a pretty important thing. Constantly cleaning the surface that you're working on to make sure that you're not leaving any extra debris that could get stuck in the stain or the polyurethane down the line. Doing that, taking time to prep beforehand, vitally important. I got a little impatient in certain parts. Didn't do it everywhere, but would always recommend making sure that you take care and prep your surfaces before you work on them. There was a little bit of mishap with the stain, which I'll talk about later, but as you can see, I went back on it to try to even it out the best I possibly could. After letting the stain dry, I went back over and swept, and then I also sanded the surface with 220 grit, and then went and re-swept, which you're seeing right here. Again, prepping the surface, making sure that it's all ready for polyurethane, and making sure that I can get an even application. It didn't take much sanding, just doing a quick swipe with 220 over each portion of the floor was good enough for me. All right, floors are sanded, swept. So we scuff up the floor a little bit with some 220 grit sandpaper to let the polyurethane seep into the last layer a little bit more so it sticks better and it creates a smoother finish. Supposedly, I don't know what I'm doing, but yeah. So we're gonna put the polyurethane on and then get the heck out of Dodge. But first, gotta put this respirator on. So.
All right. Now we can put some polyurethane on.
Applying the polyurethane went pretty similarly to how we applied the stain with the lambskin pad and the wood block. Again, I started out here by pouring the stain on, but as you can see, I quickly switched over to dipping the lambskin pad into the bucket full polyurethane. It just allowed for it to be a little less soaked, the pad itself, and then actually evenly apply it versus getting a pool of the poly when I first set the mop down, and then by the end having almost none on the mop. So again, allowed for a more even process. All right, well, that was my first attempt at finishing hardwood floors. A couple things that I learned, that I would definitely take into the future. One, always wear a respirator, especially when working with polyurethane. Came down with an illness when I didn't wear it the first time around. Just to wore it, felt much better. The second one, pretty obvious again, but make sure you thoroughly mix the stain can that you get off the shelf. Obviously you can shake it, that's fine, but make sure you stir it as well to get it full, because some of the color sank to the bottom. You can see it in the dining room a little bit. But in regards to pre-treating the floors, there were a couple options that I saw. Obviously, first you can use some sort of wood conditioner. I didn't attempt that. I did water popping. So water popping allows for the pores of the wood to open, so that when you go to apply the stain seeps a little bit further into the wood, allowing the grain to show a little bit more, from my understanding. So a cheaper alternative is water popping versus buying the wood conditioner, but again, I haven't actually messed with that. I thought water popping was a very solid option for the floors. And then lastly, there are also a couple alternatives or options for brushes. So you can either use a lamb skin pad with a wood block on just a mop handle, a broom handle, or you can use a T-bar applicator. I used the lambskin wool pad just because I was using an oil-based stain and it allowed for a more even coating. When I would pour it, it didn't really spread like I wanted it to, so I would evenly apply it in a bucket on the pad beforehand and then drag after the fact. If you're using water-based stain, from what I was reading, the T-bar applicator might be nice because it spreads like water, a lot more fluid. The oil is obviously more viscous. So, a couple of options to choose there as well, but I think both, from my research, are great options. So overall, that was my first attempt on these floors. Obviously, a lot I learned that I could take into the next process, but very happy with how they turned out. And with the 3 applications of the polyurethane that I applied, should last about 5 to 10 years. So very excited for that. And the total cost, you can see probably right around here, was between $600 and $700. I've read that the hardwood floors refinish can apply north of $5,000 into ROI on the property. So obviously it depends on the market as well. But overall, pretty inexpensive to do. Obviously, if you factor in labor, which I'm obviously not because I did it myself with the help of Dad on sanding. Obviously, thank you to Dad for that. Would come out to more, but just raw materials was around $700. So I would say very worth it to do on your own if you have the opportunity and the ability to, which I think anybody has the ability to. So overall, and fun project. So be on the lookout for future videos.